Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you're listening to Watch This List Unplugged. Today is another episode of comfy films, comfort movies, and we have my buddy Tyler Harris, whose LB handle is the same as his name, coming to grace us with his presence as well as his comfort movies, which have quite a bit of nostalgia to them and are, I think Tyler actually may be my first guest whose picks are all in succession chronologically. So Tyler, I don't know if this was a consideration that you had initially thought to do, but then sort of came about deciding that you were going to do that, but you are in a category all your own because of it.
Yeah, so the process of actually trying to pick 3 comfort films, I don't know if you realize what you're doing to your guests because it's incredibly agonizing. Just only being able to pick 3. It's similar to Letterboxd, where they only let you pick 4 favorites, and they're constantly changing for me because I can never settle on what am I supposed to pick 4 favorite movies out
of all time.
Yeah, like how is this supposed to work? So that was it was an agonizing process going through like all of the movies that evoke a sense of comfort for me. And so I landed on these 3, and like I think just the way that my brain works, just them being in sequential order, which I guess we're actually moving backwards today through time.
Yes. Well, I can't let you have everything, Tyler. I mean, you got the succession part, but then we gotta change it up just a little bit.
We gotta flip the script a little bit.
Keep people on their toes.
Yeah, so I went with 3 gems that I consider to be like kind of, one of them is one of the biggest movies ever made, but the sort of unsung masterpieces of mid-2000s big canvas cinema in a way that sort of evokes a lot of nostalgia for me. And I don't know what exactly the definition for a comfort film could be other than a movie that makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside in different ways. Whether it be through nostalgia or, I think Jerry was the one that mentioned something that I love, which is the feeling of being kind of sick on a cold, overcast, gray day outside, and you're bundled up in blankets with a hot, like honey ginger tea of some sort. I'm being way too specific, but and then you throw on The Hunt for Red October, which is the perfect overcast, gray outside movie. So like something like that, like how could I not have picked that? Well, I didn't. How could I, if I'm going with mid 2000s big budget cinema, how could I, like the thought process here was, well, I have to go with the Lord of the Rings. We'll just go with all 3. That's 3 movies right there. And they're the perfect comfort films. Well, guess what? I didn't pick any of them.
Even though you watched them prior to this, like you watched Fellowship.
Right, yeah, like literally turn of the new year.
Tyler, we have to mention that the first thing that you said to me was that you were seriously, not as a joke, but actually considering doing Antichrist. By large furniture, which does not go with your definition that you just had, unless you are a psychopath. But
warm and fuzzy inside. That movie doesn't make you warm and cozy and fuzzy.
No, quite the opposite. Actually, I know that that's shocking and hard to believe.
Okay, yeah,
but
strange.
That
movie has the vibes. That's another thing. That's another thing that I consider really strongly. When we get to, I think, to Silent Hill, we'll talk about this, is a movie's vibes. Sometimes a movie does skirt on vibes alone, but,
This is kind of what my friend Adam Trainer says, that he likes movies that are pretty depressing or they're not depressing to him. Right. But a lot of times horror is also seen that way, where it can be like very soothing to people and make them feel better. It's got a sort of medicinal quality to it.
Yeah. So I guess Antichrist is sort of like a I put that in the same category. I know this is your favorite movie, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. It's sort of an
Mm,
exorcism film.
yes.
The Exorcist is the same way for me. Um, these movies where people are just dropping their masks. Speaking of masks, which is kind of a big deal on my profile on Letterboxd and in one of the movies that we're watching today. I
Uh-huh.
realized just like a couple of days ago, I sent my friend a message that like there's so much mask imagery on my profile, and I didn't even realize it until just recently. Like Eyes Wide Shut is the cover photo,
Uh-huh.
and there's the mask on the bed, and then Kingdom of Heaven is my profile picture.
The
Edward
Avatar.
Norton in Kingdom of Heaven as King Baldwin the Fourth, the last great king of Jerusalem, and um, what else was mask related? Oh, and of course the Phantom of the Opera being one of my four favorites. So
And
got a lot of
and
masks.
that's a good transition.
Yeah.
Also, you are sort of you're very interested in masks as a subject too. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
interested in like the shadow self. You are a
Mm-hmm.
teacher.
Yep.
You know literature very well. You're all about it. Like in terms of like as much as I mean, because it's interesting that a person who has like their profile about masks to have their real name as their handle. So you're not
Yeah.
really like you're not necessarily hiding
Not trying to
behind
hide
anything.
anything. Nope.
Yeah.
Just trying to hide from my students, maybe.
Yeah.
I have
Or
some students that follow me on Letterboxd, and
do you really?
yeah, definitely.
Do they talk to you about your movie reviews?
Yeah, they say they're really long and like
Oh,
they didn't know that like I would have gone that in depth. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm your English teacher. Like, of course, I go in depth onto things like subtextually and yeah,
right. I would think that
yeah.
that would not be surprising at all, but then again, kids today, what do
Kids
they
these
know,
days,
Tyler?
big dumb
Okay,
idiots.
so spe- so speaking of
Just
masks,
kidding. I love my students.
you love them and they
Yep.
might see this, so you should probably be nice. We
Mhm.
will start in reverse. So this is starting in the year what? We're in 2004.
Oh wait, you're
Or
moving
no, we're in
forward.
2006.
You're
We're in
moving
two,
ahead, and I wasn't ready to
okay.
move into the first film yet.
I know we're going to end with your
I, I,
first.
I still no. I still have to talk about how agonizing it was to pick these three movies.
Oh,
I
continue,
could have gone
Tyler.
with the Matrix trilogy.
Right. We're
I
still
could have.
thinking back.
Why isn't Master and Commander in this list? That's the perfect comfort film.
Why isn't it?
All of those are like great, Lord of the Rings, Matrix Reloaded, and Revolutions, Master and Commander. The Pirates trilogy, Gore Verbinski's Pirates trilogy. That's a comfort. Those are all like mid 2000s
Goodness.
crowning achievements, and
What
instead
was
we
your
went with these three.
what was your determining factor, Tyler?
Well, yeah, I think that's where the conversation of nostalgia comes into play.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That these had the most the weightiest nostalgia to them?
I think so. Yeah, for different reasons.
And also, I don't think that you saw like a common thread between them, right? When you initially made this, you didn't actually feel like they were related. Because I definitely do now after having seen them. But you didn't
I
initially, right?
didn't initially when I was just kind of like, these are the three that I've more or less decided on. Didn't
Uh huh.
see a common theme necessarily, but it's there.
It definitely is. And we're going to see if your common theme is the same as my common theme.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay. Hopefully, if we
Yeah.
can get through them.
Really, one of the things that I want to mention and that I think we can continue to bring up is just a sense of authenticity. I think all
Hmm.
three of these movies have a like a genuine sense of authenticity that movies that are released today, a lot of big, like I said, big canvas films they're sort of ironic, too ironic and cynical, and postmodern and deconstructive and things like that. And you can be deconstructive in positive ways, obviously. But I feel like these three films are deconstructive in authentic, genuine ways, and they're all boosted by an auteur. That helps too.
Mm.
So yeah. Anyway,
You're
on we
calling
go.
George Lucas an auteur.
Oh yeah,
No.
definitely.
Okay. I'll give it to you. My rewatch of this movie has like much improved my memory of it. I will
Revenge of the
give
Sith.
you that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm glad
yeah.
that I'm glad of these three films when you told me about them and that you had settled on them. Revenge of the Sith was the one that I most wanted to revisit because I associate the prequels so much with my younger brother.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because he was crazy about Phantom Menace, especially because he was a kid. I mean, and we saw it so many times in the theater because he wanted to see it over and over and over and was so obsessed and had toys and everything. So
Yep.
it
You're
was
speaking my language.
It didn't become a movie that I could possibly relate to in any sort of way without disassociating from my brother and his like, that whole thing of like people's brothers in a certain time period being obsessed with Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, I think I was that brother. So
I think you were. Yeah.
And I think your brother also has a connection to Silent Hill as well.
Right, because he played Silent Hill 2 on the PS2.
Yep.
But did not finish it like you. You did the whole series, right?
Well, I only ever played Silent Hill through 3.
Okay, and then you stopped. Because there's a bunch.
For some reason, yeah, there's way too many. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Konami and the mess that they are.
Okay, so we're going to start with Silent Hill.
Okay.
Which is 2006, directed by Christoph Gans, which I'm probably saying wrong.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to say that in like a French accent, you can feel free, but I cannot.
Nope.
I can only do Australian or British. British. I can't do French.
I can't do any accents.
At all?
Not really.
Oh.
I can try.
You're just American. Okay. Well,
I'm not going to do it on a podcast is my point.
Okay.
Why would I subject anyone to that?
Yes. We appreciate your discretion.
Thank you.
So Silent Hill is a movie that looks like a video game that is based on a video game. And it has Sean Bean, which I have learned since then that people don't really care for his involvement in it, not because of Sean Bean. Obviously, we all love him, but just his like presence. So
yeah, most people are wrong about most things most of the time. So
that is your edict.
Yeah, that's my motto.
So are you calling everyone out that I just said on this point then?
Yeah, Sean Bean is amazing in this movie.
Okay, but not him as an actor. I'm talking about that they don't like his plot line. They wish that like
no. It's what makes the movie what it is.
Okay, tell me why.
Okay, so what would the film be without him?
Well, it'd be more like The Descent, for instance, where there's we're not outside of the cave, right? We're just in it.
Yeah. And I guess you could say that that Rose and Sharon descend into a bit of a cave when they descend into Silent Hill.
Yes, I think so.
And there's even like if you want to look at it from like Joseph Campbell, you could definitely say that they're making the hero's descent. The problem is that they never come out.
Right.
Yeah. Spoilers.
We
don't care about spoilers.
No. We're past it. We've transcended.
They'll be fine. So I think what Cian Bian's character does is he helps to. You're not gonna call me out on that.
Well, you made me think of that he is in Lord of the Rings. That's what I just made that connection.
Yes,
but,
yeah.
I think of him as Ned.
Yes, yeah, Ned, Boromir, Sean Bean.
Mm-hmm.
For as big of a Bond fan as I am, I don't remember which agent
GoldenEye
sign he had in GoldenEye. Was it 00?
I was about to say. I thought you were going to tell me you didn't know what Bond movie he was in.
No, I remember GoldenEye. Yeah. I just didn't remember which agent number he had.
Oh, okay. Well, that
doesn't matter.
I don't know. He's
Sean
also
Bean,
in Ronin too. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, his character helps to, I think, ground the film in reality.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of view the movie
Literally.
as this strange intersection between. So you have Silent Hill in the '70s, which is how the town at its height, which we
Right.
don't really see much of. And then you have Silent Hill now, which Sean Bean is traversing through to attempting to find his wife and daughter. And then you have Silent Hill in Fog, which is sort of this alternate dimension. It's like another dimension that they have entered into.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like, so Robert Fitzgerald, his translation of the Iliad is it translates the word Hades to undergloom, and I feel like I use that word all the time. So it's sort of like an undergloom, Silent Hill
Mm.
is. And then you have Silent Hill in Darkness, which is actually like how it's explained in the movie's production notes, like from the website that the movie used to have. I was able to find like the archived website of its production notes. And so you have like Silent Hill in Fog and Silent Hill in Darkness, which is when the sirens go off and the creatures come out.
Right.
The Gray Children and the Armless Ones and Pyramid Head and all of that. So you have this weird intersection of these four different versions of Silent Hill, and Sean Bean is kind of an integral part of the narrative in that he continues to bring the audience back to remembering, oh yeah, 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 yeah. There is a
Where are
reality.
we?
There is
Right.
a heaven, and we're stuck in the Konami Inferno. We're stuck in hell with Sharon trying to find her daughter. So
Right.
yeah, or sorry, with Rose trying to find her daughter Sharon.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is this comforting to you because you played the game and it takes you back to that? Or is it comforting to you even if there were no game? I am interested in the connection between those two things because most people, when they review it, at least on LB, it's like, this is the greatest video game movie ever made. And
Yeah.
it's not really extracted from that sort of reality. And I don't know if that's
I think
part
it
of
is.
why you
Yeah,
resonate with it.
the digital surrogacy aspect is a huge element of Silent Hill. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it was a game plays directly into the way that the text plays out, and the form
Okay.
of the actual piece of art that this movie is kind of it's the actual story. There's original characters and things, and then there's names that are being pulled in from the first couple games. It's sort of an amalgamation of Silent Hill, Silent Hill 2, and Silent Hill 3, but not really Silent Hill 3. Although Silent Hill 3, the game, has a lot to do with motherhood. So I feel like that was kind of pulled in. But yeah, this movie is like I think I used in my review the phrase demonic lullaby. So it's a way to experience playing Silent Hill without actually having to play Silent Hill, which you can't really do anymore unless you have like an original PlayStation or PlayStation 2. But again,
Which I have.
different conversation for
Yeah.
how messed up this franchise has become by Konami and their greed. They're let me just say they're sitting on a mine of diamonds, and they're not letting anyone in. So yeah, although there is a Silent Hill 2 remake coming out soon, so I'm excited
I was about
to
to
see what
say
that's
that.
all about. Yeah.
Yeah, and then my brother was talking to me about Fallout being an Amazon show.
Yes,
That's
Fallout is
gonna
becoming an Amazon show. Yeah, yeah. Not
Yes,
sure what to
which
think
is
of that
just
either.
yeah, this is like there's nothing new under the sun and that things get recycled to the end of time
Yeah.
and that there is no new material or new ideas and et cetera, et cetera.
So
And it's also playing off nostalgia.
Yeah. So video game movies are notoriously terrible all the time. I think the
Right.
reason why Silent Hill typically gets pulled into the conversation is because it is the film that so closely replicates that feeling. Like I said, digital surrogacy. The feeling of the game is distilled here. It's not like if you're adapting a novel, you kind of have to compact the novel. Like I know you're currently reading Infinite Jest. Imagine making that into a
Yes.
film. You would have to compact it.
Impossible.
It would be impossible.
Yes.
This movie, instead of compacting anything, seems to distill the atmosphere and the vibes. Again, there's that word. And even things like the way that the camera moves. It moves like you're playing the game. If you notice the
Yes.
way that, you know, so yeah. So Dan Lauston, the cinematographer, and Christoph Gans, like actively worked to try and replicate the feeling of playing the game.
And it does. I feel like it does that. It
Yeah,
really
yeah.
reminded me. I don't have a ton of experience, but it really reminded me of Until Dawn
Yeah.
and playing it, because even though like you're not moving the person, the way that like she would walk through, even like walking through buildings or running away or being attacked, it literally looked like how cutscenes would look when you're watching it, when you're watching those cutscenes in a game. Because Until Dawn's like, I mean, where there's scenes like it's a movie as well.
Sure. And
And
even like
yeah.
things like I always went, because I actually only just watched this movie for the first time a couple months ago.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like this is a comfort film for me that's new.
Right.
But it's one that I continue to return to, even though I might not log it over and over on Letterboxd like I do some movies. It's one that I'll continue. Like I will literally just throw a scene on from it on YouTube and just kind of
And then
let
just
it
watch
play
it.
out.
Yeah.
Part of it is because, well, two reasons. The music is taken directly from the games, so there's that. Akira Yamaoka, who is an incredible composer, and he does a lot of sampling, and so I don't know. This was your first time watching the film. What did you think of the music?
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I cranked it.
Yeah, good.
Just for atmosphere. I mean, I think you're
super atmospheric.
For full immersion.
Yeah,
this seemed like actually I did that for all three of your films, to be honest.
Yes. All three of these.
All three of them need to be cranked to 11.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I had the sense anyway that music's very important to you. Because not just because of Phantom, but also it seems like you talked about this with me a little bit before, like the operatic nature of things that you're drawn to. I think you like things that are very not bombastic, but just like it's not subtle, it's not quiet.
No. Yeah.
Everything's on a very grand scale, big.
Yes. Go big or go home, as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
yeah.
I love like Ingmar Bergman as much as the next guy. These sort of quiet Scandinavian dramas, but also I
like Pirates.
I like Pirates.
And Fellowship.
Here's a question: Pirates of the Caribbean or Pirates of the Caribbean?
Caribbean, surely.
Can we take a poll?
If anybody, I'm going to tell you guys this right now. If any of you are pronouncing this Pirates of the Caribbean, unfollow me. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
And follow me instead.
And follow Tyler instead. Caribbean, right?
though, like if you're going on a Caribbean cruise.
Oh, no.
You say the Caribbean.
We probably should have discussed this prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Because otherwise I would have fired you. All right, so that's enough for Silent Hill. Silent Hill is worth seeing if you are a person who played the game, but then you've probably already seen it. Or if you're just like me, where you want something that is different, because it really was a completely different experience for me.
Yeah. The things
and I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Good. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. I know that you were worried.
A little bit. I don't know how to gauge people's reactions. I watched this movie with a friend of mine, and he was like almost like disassociating during the film, and we're pretty sure that it was like because because
was
of
too
the
much.
just the way that the movie operates was just almost too surreal in a way. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, things that I hyperfixate before we move on to the next film, just
sure.
like the things that I really really love, other than the music, like Laurie Holden's wardrobe, where she's Sybil Bennett, the cop.
Yes.
Like just like the way that she still has the gloves on, the motorcycle gloves, but she has like the short sleeve police shirt. That's so like Japanese video game made for America. And that's another thing I wanted to mention is just like how this movie distills like all of these national tastes are distilled through the film of like you have a sort of a French New Extremity director taking
Mm-hmm.
on a Japanese game through the lens of an American horror film. And so it's this weird melting pot of all of these persuasions, and it's great. It also has a lot to say about femininity and motherhood. We didn't get much into that, I know, but yeah,
What part of this, to just to make sure that we have a through line, what part of
sure.
this has to do with masks?
Perhaps the way that um, not necessarily masks per se, but the way that women are perceived in mythology, I think, has a huge subtextual uh, play. There's a huge. So, for instance, okay, I'm like my brain is going to like 100 other places about this. So, like one thing that I can use as an example, that's what I'll
Mm-hmm.
do. I'll just extract
Okay.
an example. So there's the street. I don't know if you noticed Midwich Street, and then there's Midwich School as well. That's the school that she's going through, and there's the janitor. Okay, the janitor is terrifying to me still today. But Midwich just like hit me like a ton of bricks when the first time I saw it because like, oh, okay, I see what we're doing here. If you want to read that esoterically, like that is the combination, the synthesis of the two ways that women are typically perceived in mythology. You've got midwifery, the mid
Mm.
part. So women are either portrayed for their fertility aspects, midwifery. Obviously,
Maternal.
yeah, the maternal aspect. Women are the natural selectors of our species. All of this kind of stuff, and then you have the witch part, which
Yeah.
that also may play into our discussion someday down the line of Antichrist. But so yeah, midwich. Okay, so you have these the negative associations with femininity and the more, I suppose you could say, positive associations with, and by positive I mean like productive. Um,
Right.
Obviously, not every woman is going to be a mother, and obviously not every woman is a witch, but typically in
Just the
the
cool ones.
exactly, yeah. So but so you've got these representations that are sort of distilled in this, just this name alone, right? And then of course you have the fact that Rose, well, the name alone, Rose, evokes the
A
blossoming
feminine
of yeah.
image.
But Rose is a mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except she's not, because
Except she's
Sharon is
not because she's
adopted, right?
adopted. Yeah.
So, and the entire reason why the plot itself unfolds the way it does is because Rose wants to take Sharon to Silent Hill to learn about Sharon's past because Sharon is adopted. And so it's like knowledge is the thing that Rose is seeking,
Mm-hmm.
which ends up actually separating and untethering her and her daughter from the real world. And she falls from she in a way it's sort of evocative of the fall of man in Genesis, or in John Milton. You have this longing for knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then you have the temptation to take a bite of that apple and to have the scales fall from your eyes, and to see yourself for what you
And
are.
see things as they are.
Right.
Right.
But the problem with that is, you're dooming yourself to a fall, to a tragic fall, which is exactly what this film is. Ultimately, I think that Rose and her maternal instinct, and this sort of the disconnect between her and Sharon, but the disconnect that is ultimately transcended at the end of the film. Still, at the end of the film, they are not connected to the real world at all. Christopher, her husband, Sean Bean, is like lost, and they're lost seemingly forever. I know there's a sequel to the movie. I haven't seen the sequel. The sequel, I think, brings I think it brings Sharon back to her father, but then her mother is still trapped in Silent Hill, so they have to go to her. So
but you kind of, it's almost like by default when they create these types of things, you can't really end it on a good note, or you can't continue most of the time. So I don't know that that's necessarily emblematic of what they really were trying to say, other than like, this needs to continue. But yes,
right.
I follow you.
Yeah. So
I follow your train of thought.
Yeah. So the Sean Bean aspect of the film, to go back to that, is like, he remains trapped in the reality of investigation. Like his entire portion of the film is a kind of a subgenre of horror that I deeply, deeply love. Investigative horror, things like, just off the top of my head, I love David Pryor's The Empty Man, which is like 2.5 hours of this character trying to investigate this cult. But yeah, so the Christopher's subplot or parallel plot is an investigative horror film that actually doesn't have any horror in it at all. It's just really wistful and sad, because he is permanently disconnected, untethered from his family in a way. And he's always digging. He's finding nothing. He's surrounded by perpetual rainfall, it feels like. That's literally the last shot of the movie is the camera pans away and it's raining and the bushes, and then it fades into the credits. And then he's also aided by Thomas Gucci, Detective Gucci, Kim Coates' character. So in a way, he's sort of doubting Thomas, I guess. But yeah.
And this is what Tyler finds comforting, because it speaks to some sort of like reality of life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, if you can't tell from my reviews on Letterboxd, that's kind of what I'm always trying to extract from films, are deeper, metaphysical, metaphorical, mythical connections. So that something that represents our reality in some way, a reality that we may not always, see,
be aware of. Yeah.
Also,
it's kind of like
yeah.
Well, I was going to say that the Upside Down from Stranger Things was also based off of the Silent Hill game.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I've only ever seen the first season of that show. So,
either way, that's also just, that's communicating that there are things that we can't see that are going on.
There's this metaphysical reality to us that, that
you can't see.
Right. So, what do you think about the fact that Christopher, the father, the husband, is also the same name as the director? So, I see something like that and I'm like, okay, there's deeper stuff going on here than people give this movie credit for. Also, the fact that Alice Krieg's character is named Christabella. Okay, well, that's sort of like the feminine, like, mirror image of Christopher. So,
and they both have Christ in the name.
Exactly. So there.
Subtle. Tyler likes subtlety.
That's right.
Okay, Tyler, we're going to move on.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Going to the next one.
Continue.
Are you
forever,
ready?
But yeah.
I know you can.
I know.
The next one
reeling it in.
I'm reeling it in. For those of you who loved Maestro, there's a shout out. The next one is 2005, episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, directed and written by none other than the auteur himself. true canon,
True King.
George Lucas,
True King.
true canon. Well, there's all this stuff about,
Oh,
I
right,
love
right, right. Yeah,
reading
yeah, yeah, yeah.
about
Yeah.
the canon stuff with Star Wars fans, because there's like Lucas canon. I don't know if you
Right.
know.
Oh, sure.
I know you do. So I love that. I love people who are like devoted to the Lucas canon, and that Lucas himself is just like, whatever, this thing has just become whatever it is. But
Mhm.
then there are people who are like, no, if he didn't say it, then.
Right.
But Revenge of the Sith, you ended up, Tyler, watching episode 1 and 2.
I did.
In addition to the 3 comfort films that you chose.
Yeah.
I, however, only watched SITH. But I was very struck by its sort of addiction quality. And I almost thought it would just have been so hilarious for me to do that as Amy's progress. If I had done Revenge of the
Yes.
Sith, that would have been so funny. But I think it's more fitting that it's in comfort. But
Maybe.
I literally, when I was watching it, I was like, you know what? I mean, I really could have, not just as a joke, but in all seriousnness, because as much as Anakin, I mean, Hayden Christensen's a bit OTT, but it is getting at this seduction thing that is very, very prevalent in Phantom of the Opera. And that was something that I felt very strongly with yours, is like the innocent person or the unsuspecting person going about their business and being drawn into darkness, or being allured away from the right path. And so, yeah, Revenge of the Sith is surprisingly deep, I will say.
Oh, it's unfathomably deep. It's got all sorts of
right.
layers, and it's all sorts of connections to. Yeah. How far do you want to go? Because like we can.
Okay, I want to know. Tell
Yeah.
me as a kid.
Okay. Yeah.
Kid Tyler.
Yes.
Because we're on comfort, we're not on, the dark side as alcohol or drugs.
Yeah.
What do you feel about this as just like growing up and being obsessed? And then how do you feel about it now as an adult?
Okay, so when I was a child, I have these distinct memories.
You were like 9 years old, right?
Yeah, I was 9 when this movie came out, which I know,
right?
Whatever. I'm young, but watching this film in the theater, I'm convinced it kind of changed my life in a way, because I have such an affinity and a love for complex mythologies and world building and storytelling. And I feel like I only just recently came to this realization on the phone with another friend of mine when we were talking about Star Wars, and I was talking about Revenge of the Sith, and it just clicked in my head that like, oh, that's where I developed my love of like myth and tragedy and all of these things. Like at a very, very young age, George Lucas was beaming this crazy brain of mine with all of these images and experiences. And so like I think back to like the Lego sets that were released with this movie, and like just like literally being able to give a child the opportunity to build their own world, and to not just build their own world, but to imitate the world that in which they are obsessed with. So, I wasn't creating my own Star Wars stories. I was having Anakin and Obi-Wan fight one another, on the lava planet. So like, yeah, I'm imitating the story. And of course, if you want to cut deeper than that, it's, Aristotle tells us that the root of all tragedy is imitation. And the fact that imitation has such an important there's such an important element of imitation in like childhood development and psychology, and like you see kids imitating their like parents, for instance, because the only way to know what something is to, in a way, actually act it out. And so
Right.
it's like, the childhood state of play and is totally rooted in imitation. But if the childhood state of play is rooted in the very thing that is the root of tragedy, then I don't know what that says about our world and the reality that's unfolding before us.
True.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and even in like On Writing, which I just finished,
yep.
Stephen King, his like mission statement is to read a lot and write a lot. And the way that you learn, like he could even track his growth as a writer depending on what he was reading at the time. That's happening with me. I'm being very influenced by David Foster Wallace right now and Stephen King
Yeah.
because that's what I'm reading. But like there's like stages of your life where, art will inform because you are either consciously or unconsciously copying but I think imitation is instinctively in an effort to find your own voice.
Sure.
You aren't going to like stay there. You're not like imitating to make that imitation your eventual identity. You're trying to figure out where your voice is and what you sound like. And the only way to do that is to copy people that you feel very kindred with. So that makes sense to me that the end goal is not the tragedy. The end goal is to like transcend that stage. You don't want to like get stuck in it.
The tragedy is certainly a potential result. I always view it as,
Oh yeah.
the tragedy
Yeah.
of Oedipus begins at the crossroads, right? So it's the decisions that you make in your life that either lead you to finding, legitimate individuality and psychological integration, or a tragic demise in some way. And oftentimes, I teach Macbeth to my students, and it's it's one of my favorite pieces of literature. And I only just recently realized this, that everyone always says that Macbeth's tragic flaw is hubris and pride.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
that I agree with that, because in a way I do, because it is his hubris, it's his pride that sort of blocks his sight. Um, but also it's just blatant ignorance, self-ignorance is what I'm trying to get at. The fact that Macbeth doesn't see where he is within his own narrative. And he's unconsciously acting out other people's demands and the fates, and all of these things. I mean, there's a reason why, for instance, the witches in Macbeth are called the Three Weird Sisters, because it's not just that they're weird, they're witches, they're bearded ladies and all this stuff. Which, by the way, the bearded ladies, not, of course, men would have played the parts in Shakespeare's day, but like they're right there. There's your integration of masculinity and femininity, right? So, but like also, weird is the Old English word for fate. So the three weird sisters are literally able to see into the seeds of time, like Banquo says. So this lack of self-knowledge, this inability of Macbeth to be able to see himself within his story, plays directly into his tragic downfall. Part of the tragedy is the fact that he discovers this about himself right at the very end, but it's too late by that point. And I feel like Anakin Skywalker goes through the same thing. Oedipus goes through the same thing. Oedipus knows man. He's wise. He when he goes to the city,
like Hamlet.
Yeah, exactly. When Oedipus goes to the city, he's able to solve the riddle of the Sphinx, and the answer to the riddle is man. So Oedipus knows man. It's just the one tragic flaw of Oedipus is that he doesn't know himself. So he ends up sleeping with his mother and having children with Jocasta and killing his own father. And so this self-ignorance occurs when you aren't able to actually psychologically see yourself in your own narrative. And so that's why I think it's so important to be able to sort of steep your life in great stories and great mythologies, because the more you know about storytelling and the more you understand about heroism and all of its different facets, the more you can perhaps avoid being self-ignorant, like
But Tyler,
Achilles, like
I think
Anakin.
it's also about like getting rid of the thing that is helping your deception continue. Like Anakin gets to the point where he can't really make a choice anymore. Like what you're talking about is I think, as I understand it, still within free will, whereas like with certain situations like the in Phantom of the Opera and in this, they are enticed to such an extent that you would have to get rid of that mechanism prior, before they were even able to do what you're suggesting. Like you'd have to remove the thing that is blinding them to themselves before they could even be like, oh, I can't see, right? I
Yeah,
mean, how
it's the
could they?
question that I ask my students when we're reading Macbeth is, how much agency does Macbeth have here? It's kind of
Exactly.
an
And
impossible question to answer.
that exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Hamlet is so fascinating, which I just rewatched.
Hmm.
Sir Ken, we talked about this
Yes,
last week. Um, is how self-aware he is, but his self-awareness is, it does have a direct link to his actions. He is able to act on what he deduces, and whether he feigns, there's that argument of like, is he faking it or not? But let's pretend for the sake of this argument that he is just faking it for
sure.
others, but he is completely there. Um, that's a perfect
By
example
the
of like a
way,
person who is
he
self-possessed.
absolutely is faking it. The entire point of Hamlet is performance.
I know,
Yeah,
but some
yeah,
people actually think that he was mad, which I
yeah.
just,
I don't agree.
okay. Yeah. Those are the people that pronounce it Caribbean. So
Wow. Okay.
just
I see
kidding,
how it's
Tyler.
going.
I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I had to tie it back. So, but yeah, I think that this brings it back to uh delusion and denial, and being unable to see something until the mechanism that's blinding you is also removed. It's a
Yeah.
twofold thing. Is how I see it.
So one of the things that I noticed in this rewatch of the prequels, which by the way, this was just such a rewarding experience rewatching those films, because for a long time, obviously I grew up with the prequels and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always preferred the original trilogy. Um, but they were still movies that like little Tyler didn't necessarily know the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. So like the prequels, I was all about them. Except the prequels aren't bad. I mean, I know we're going to have a disagreement on episode 1 and 2, maybe, but um, there's no denying the majesty and the sweep of episode 3. I mean, every single scene between Padme and Anakin, every single scene, I was in tears last night, like just crying like a baby at those at those scenes. Um, and what's strange is, little Tyler was too. Like I was so emotionally swept up by that feeling that Anakin has of, you know, being plagued with these prophetic death dreams of his mother, and then, losing his mother, and then for that to come back in the third film with Padme. Obviously, there's the whole Oedipal connection between his love for Padme and his love for his mother,
And wanting to save her.
and wanting to save her. And I think there's even a moment in Attack of the Clones where Anakin says that he's dreaming of his mother, and this is like right when they're on their way, I think, to meet with Padme, or right after they meet her for the first time in like however many years it's been since they've seen one another. He says that he would much prefer to dream about Padme. What he doesn't like, you know not what you wish, Anakin. Like, you will be dreaming about her, and they will be these prophetic nightmares of her dying,
Mm,
and it's something that you
right.
can't stop, no matter how hard you try. And oftentimes
Yeah.
that's one of the axioms of tragedy are people trying to stop things that are unstoppable, um, and tearing themselves apart because of it. Um, when I think of characters that tear themselves apart, I think about Hamlet, of course, because he's like in his interior, his psyche is just like totally like eating itself alive. But um,
But do you feel, are you drawn to stories that where there's no way out?
not necessarily, although
Or
I guess I like the courage. I like the courage of that to admit that maybe there is no way out. Obviously, it's perhaps a cynical read, um, but
yeah,
I
but
think
it
it's
seems like you like
profound.
them where the person is like genuinely trying very hard to do it and then like failing.
Yeah, I liked
Or yeah.
Sakana, her episode where she was talking about films where people are trapped in their own perhaps
Mhm.
negative personhood, but are
Right.
desperately attempting to claw their way to
Out.
goodness. Um,
Mhm.
and oftentimes, of course, in the American '70s cinematic tradition of cynicism, they don't get there. But yeah, so
So there's something that's appealing to you that is sort of like by design these people are going to end up at a certain place. There's this fate aspect, like an inevitability aspect to it, but you want to see the struggle uh as being like sort of a valiant one. It's just that
maybe not even valiant. Like I
well
think about, like, for instance, I don't mean to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to bring up the Iliad.
oh no.
Okay,
Okay.
it's like every other review that I write on Letterboxd, but
Cuz it's on your
it's just on
mind.
my mind all the time. It can't not be.
Right.
So in the
Right.
Iliad, you have Achilles attempting to conquer a system of conflict. Okay, the warrior mentality of the Iliad is kleos and time, right? So the honor that you get on the battlefield, the stuff that you get on the battlefield, like his war bride who's taken away from him by Agamemnon. He's attempting to, in the Iliad, reject a culture of honor, the culture that he actually serves.
Mhm.
So the culture that he serves takes something away from him, which actually happens to Anakin Skywalker when he's not made master by the Jedi Council.
Right.
So it's like
The
I
Senate.
have served
Yeah.
this culture and this system for so long, and you're taking this away from me. And of course, in the Iliad, when Odysseus and Ios and Phoenix come to, or Phoenix and Ajax are their kind of modern ways of saying their names, when they come to try and convince Achilles of, um, returning to the battle and helping the Greeks against the Trojans, he has a complete and total rejection of their entire culture. It's an unfounded, unfathomably um, uh, terrible, devastating rejection of everything that these men stand for. Um,
Mm.
at the same time, Achilles is also trying to conquer death in a way. I mean, the entire poem begins with the rage of Achilles. Um, that's the opening line is, sing muse, sing the rage of Achilles. Well, why is Achilles is why does he have rage? Why does he have anger? Um, if you look at the original Greek, the Greek word for rage that's used by Homer is menos, and that is only ever used in terms of the gods. And so it's Achilles, his godlike wrath, and the only reason why it's a godlike wrath is because he is a demigod. His mother is a water goddess, but his father is Peleus, just a regular man. So he's torn between these two. He's torn between an immortal life and a mortal life. He has to die, though. In fact, he's even told this by his mother. You're either going to live on in obscurity at home, and then die, or you can die on the battlefield and gain immortal glory, but you're
Right.
still dead, right? So he's upset at death. He's upset at the fact that he's going to have to die. And ultimately, Achilles, to come back to your original point, like 30 minutes later, he is trapped in a way. He's trapped in fate. And this
Like,
actually,
damn if you do, damned if you
oh,
don't.
absolutely. And
Catch 22.
there are these beautiful moments in the Iliad where you see the different layers of Achilles. And I will ultimately connect this back to Revenge of the Sith at some point, because when Achilles fights, or I should begin at the beginning of the end, when he allows Patroclus to put on his own armor and go out and fight the Trojans, and Patroclus dies. When Patroclus puts on Achilles' armor, he, in a sense, speaking of masks, that's a mask of war. You're sort of hiding your fear for a mask of courage on the battlefield. And so when Achilles allows Patroclus to put on his mask, he's compromising his own compromise in a way. He's compromising himself without compromising himself. And he's saying, okay, you can go out and you can pretend to be me and you can fight the Trojans. But I'm going to stay here, and it's not actually going to be me. And as soon as Patroclus puts the armor on, he becomes a different person. He's not the gentle Patroclus that we used to know. He becomes this vicious, mechanical nightmare for the Trojans, who ends up being killed by Hector. Hector takes the armor off of Patroclus. He puts it on. Patroclus, close to death, gives him a prophecy that Hector himself is going to die. Hector refuses to listen to the prophecy. Why? Because he's wearing Achilles' armor, and it changed him into a different person. There's this weird like possession element in the Iliad that no one ever talks about with Achilles' armor, where whoever's wearing it almost becomes, like I said, an extension of Achilles. Okay, so we go to the big giant battle at the end of the Iliad. Hector and Achilles are fighting one another. If you just step back and watch that, like look at it, he's fighting himself. Hector is donned in his armor, and Achilles is fighting sort of a projection of himself. And then of course he kills Hector, and he does terrible things to his body. By the way, spoiler alert for a 1,000-year-old poem, but whatever. So he I think people will be okay if they're even still listening anymore. But
Tyler, bringing this back.
No.
Yeah,
yes. I'm almost there. I promise. So he defiles Hector's body, and then of course Priam comes back, comes to the Greek camp, and he has this moment. King Priam of the Trojans is protected by the gods, and he's ushered into the Greek camp, right? And he shares this moment of beautiful humanity between him and Achilles, as Priam is begging Achilles to have his son's body back. He wants Hector's body back, right? And they share a meal together, and they cry together. And it's this beautiful moment that occurs at the end of a poem that's like 23 books of devastating war and horror and blood, and people are getting like spears to the forehead and their eyes are popping out. Like there's some gruesome stuff in the Iliad, but then you end on this note of beauty in a way, and these two people coming together. And I view in a way Anakin as a sort of Achilles figure who, again, he's trying to conquer a system of conflict. He is ultimately rejected by the culture that he serves. He is completely and totally torn between his sort of pagan release of emotions that sort of dictates his actions, all of this passion and longing and these feelings and all of this fear. He's dictated by fear ultimately. But then he's torn between that and the Jedi training of rationality and detachment and civic duty and peace and tradition and all of these things. So, and he's also trying to conquer death. I mean, this is the entire impetus of all of his actions is Padme's going to die, and he doesn't want that to happen. And so he's lured and tempted by Palpatine Oh my gosh, I'm just going on forever. I'm so sorry, but like it's so layered and dense and complex. But the whole remember the conversation. It's the famous conversation when Palpatine is talking to him about Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Yes.
So
yes.
Anakin is told a story, and he begins to imitate the story, and he doesn't listen to the end of the story. Darth Plagueis the Wise is killed.
Well, Palpatine just decides wisely to leave that part out of the retelling as to how everything sort of panned out.
Right. So,
but I mean, he also can't resist it.
Yeah.
Though,
so, but the very fact that it's embedded in the story tells us that Anakin is doomed here. He is doomed to fall. Even though he is lured and tempted by, again, this Aristotelian imitation of Darth Plagueis the Wise and trying to save Padme, he ends up destroying himself. And Padme is sort of his Patroclus, his love. And as soon as Patroclus dies in the Iliad, Achilles is basically dead. And he only comes to life again when he is with Priam and they share this moment of humanity. And I see that directly in the story of Star Wars, where
with Luke,
with Padme being Patroclus, when she dies, he dies. They literally die at the same time, basically, like on screen. And Lucas is brilliantly cross-cutting between both of them on the medical table, right? And so they kind of die, and he's resurrected as this ghost of himself. And so throughout, it totally colors the original trilogy differently too, because as Vader, the whole entire original trilogy, he fights what ultimately killed Padme, which is her children, their children, Luke and Leia. That's what he's fighting in that original trilogy. He's fighting these little tiny projections of himself, just like Achilles was fighting a projection of himself with Hector, right? And
you need Tyler. You could literally like write. I mean, you should like do.
Well,
this
think about. Well, also think
life.
about like if Hector's wearing Achilles' armor, how could this in a way translate? Well, doesn't Luke Skywalker use Anakin's lightsaber? So like there you go. There's the sort of the armor that translates over into the projection.
Do you think that Lucas was aware of this amount of like? I mean,
if he wasn't, he was at least unconsciously aware. I mean, the man studied Joseph Campbell like crazy as a young man. So I think absolutely it's there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, but I would also say Luke is not just Hector, but he's also Priam, because like you mentioned, in Return of the Jedi, we get that moment of shared humanity, and that's the moment when Anakin comes back to life. He's resurrected.
Well, that's why
it gives me chills just thinking about it. I mean, it makes me emotional.
That's why I texted you about how like that there's an argument to be made when he goes to the dark side or becomes Vader that that Anakin is gone, that the chosen one is gone, but he's still there.
Yeah,
and that's very important.
Exactly. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, you sent the screen grab of Vader the first time we see Vader. And in a way, you know, it's meant for the audience to go, wow, yeah, Vader, you know, but also, no, this is terrible. This is a terrible tragedy that's occurring before you. You're watching Anakin Skywalker die and be reborn into the dark side, into evil.
Just like Michael Corleone becoming the Godfather.
Exactly.
There's so many examples
the
of
door
this that
closes.
Is actually absurd.
Yeah.
The door. I mean, and then the transformation of like, that's my family, Kay, not me. You know, the whole thing of like that, the corruption. Tyler,
Fear.
we have to get onto Phantom of the Opera because we are already.
I know.
But
this is bad.
This is.
We're doing the opposite of what we said we were going to do.
Yes, but I think that this is more than anything else. I didn't want to talk about like special effects. I don't want to talk about Lucas. These things just are said so much. No,
okay.
Tyler.
Well,
these things are said to death, but I do think that what you ended up saying was very, very valuable.
If we could just touch on the final fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan just once, just because it is like I
can cry.
Yeah, I genuinely think it's the crowning achievement of 2000s cinema is that fight sequence. thinker who has kind of influenced my own personal outlook on life and the way that I read art and things like that is Camille Paglia. And she wrote a book called Glittering Images, which is like her attempt to kind of, in a very brisk way, take you through the history of art and give you her take on things. And the last thing that she includes at the end of the book is the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin. There it is. There's the crowning achievement of art.
Throwing that out there.
Yeah. She calls it a black mass, which I think is just such a profound way to put it. You're watching this sort of almost like a funeral occur in front of you. And like I said, and
a betrayal.
Tears. Those like weird non-narrative films, like, not weird. I mean, I love non-narrative film, but like Samsara and Baraka, the director of those films, Ron Fricke, who's sort of worked a little bit with, what's his name? He did Koyaanisqatsi. Do you know these things? Am I just speaking a different language? Okay, I'm sorry. But like the guy who did those two, Samsara and Baraka, I believe, is Ron Fricke, and he's one of the sort of like, he's not the director of photography on the film, but he's like one of the kind of second in command, and he's the guy who went out to get all of like the lava exploding in the background and stuff that's sort of superimposed onto like all of the miniature work that they did. There is an incredible documentary called Star Wars Within a Minute, I think. And it's an episode 3. It was on the DVD that I got for Christmas when the movie was like, I was like obsessed, and I would just rewatch the special features over and over. It tells you that like all of the stuff that goes into the making of that there's just 1 minute of Star Wars, and they use a minute from this fight sequence, and it goes into like what each and every person on the crew had to do in order to make this work. And it's brilliant.
It just gives you such a deep appreciation for what people just watch in 5 minutes. And like,
they just let it glaze over them, and it's like, no. Right. You don't understand how much love and care went into this thing. And it's one of the reasons why I called, in my review of Attack of the Clones, it's one of the reasons why I called George Lucas a pre- and post-production filmmaker only, because it seems like he hates making movies, but it seems like he loves writing films,
the before and after,
and then also editing them.
Which is why he needs someone else to do the in-between, but we won't go there.
Okay, so
the final film is 2004's Phantom of the Opera, directed by Joel Schumacher, who has done so many movies that I can't even. The thing that I always associate him with, oddly enough, is Batman and Robin, and like Batman Forever.
Yes,
but he's done so many. He's done so many films.
Batman Forever is a legit masterpiece, by the way. Beautiful. Beautiful film.
Tell me also, Tyler. You said you were, for Andrew Lloyd Webber, you were in the top 2% of people last year who listened to this soundtrack on Spotify, right?
Yeah.
This is music that you love.
Yep.
Music.
The music
of the night.
Say
that we're the angel of music. The music of the night from the angel of music. But tell us why. I just now realized, by the way, for those who are not watching this as a video, I started in the afternoon recording, and now the sun is gone and it is dark in the room that I'm in because of how long that Tyler and I have been talking. This is going to absolutely.
You mean just how long I've been talking? Yeah.
That the sun was out,
I'm sorry,
and now it's gone.
Sorry. I'm like I have like this thing on the back of my head that like if you wind it up about a particular movie, I can just go.
It's okay, Tyler. I just at this point, it's like we're good. Tell us why this is comforting to you, and then this particular version, because there's a lot that goes with Phantom of the Opera, but I couldn't tell when I was watching the movie if it was a movie that you love particularly, or if it's like the themes or the story. What is it that like really compels you and draws you in about
Why
this?
not both?
Or
No.
yeah,
Yeah,
porque
the
no
thing that
estas?
actually draws me in is Gerard Butler and
Is
his
that
cape
true?
waving, his magnificent cape waving. There,
I
it's
always know when Tyler is about to give me a bunch of
10
baloney.
times. He waves his cape
Uh-huh.
10 times like a gothic vampire. It's the most glorious thing ever. Do you
I will give you this,
do you
Tyler,
yeah,
that this version had the reprise and All I Ask of You before it gets to the sort of like where the intermission part would have
right.
been is very
Oh
satisfying
yes.
on a
Yeah.
visceral level. And I listened to like Sarah Brightman, Michael Crawford, and all these other different
Mhm.
versions trying to find that sense of like gravitas and like
Mhm.
intensity. And they really don't nail it to the
No.
level that the film does. Interestingly, I thought
There's
for
a
sure
there
that
are a
this
lot
would
of Broadway snobs out there who say that the singing in this movie is terrible. And
mm,
to that I
well,
simply say, why don't you try to hit the note that Gerard Butler hits in Music of the Night? Go ahead, give it a try. Tell me how bad the music is
yeah.
or the singing is in this movie. Then after that, so
Tyler, we'll just alienate ourselves from the
I
Broadway
guess so.
community, which
I
is
guess so.
not going to be listening to this podcast.
Probably for the best anyway. So
Yeah.
unless it's Cats,
So, what speaks to you? Oh my gosh, we
we won't
won't
go
go
into
into that,
Cats
Tyler,
either.
because you.
Although I got a
What
cat
is
story.
your draw?
Okay, so
What
yeah,
brings you to this
yeah.
move? To this?
Again, this idea that there was this sort of last burp of authentic, genuine, lush and lavish cinema from the mid 2000s, and this movie strikes me as very genuine and very authentic and very heartfelt. Um,
Mm,
the people who made this movie seem to actually have like an appreciation for the story that they're adapting,
mm-hmm.
and so that's the sort of movie side of it. I love how lavish it is and rich, and just the way that it looks and the golden hues, and then like when you're underneath the city, you've got like that green fog that rolls
The
over. Yeah, the
undergloom.
undergloom. Good. The green fog that like rolls over the sewer. Basically, he's got a sewer gondola. Um, I really want a sewer gondola, but yeah,
It's a fun
it
word to say,
is.
fun
Yeah.
phrase to say.
So that's the movie part, and then of course there's the actual story part, which obviously I connect with it a lot. Maybe not like my own life experience necessarily, although um, there's some stuff there, but you know um, the themes of the film are deep and tragic, and it's a beautiful story of um, uncontrolled, unrequited love.
Mm,
Rachel Zegler talks about Snow White, and she talks about the prince being a weird stalker character and all this stuff, and I don't think she's right. Um, I think that there's way more to the story of Snow White than our modern interpretations of gender politics will lead us to believe. There's a lot of psychological significance to fairy tales, about the
mm-hmm.
integration of the genders, and Sleeping Beauty wakes up, and that is the birth of consciousness, the birth of femininity. Snow White can't stay with the dwarves forever. These seven dwarves that represent these sort of segmented uh, aspects of masculinity in a way. She has to go find
Break
break
free.
free from the simps in her life, and and in a way, Phantom of the Opera is a fairy tale. I view it as a fairy tale, and it's a tragic fairy tale because ultimately Christine does. She is not a. There's that. She has Christ in her name again. There's that again.
I know.
But she does
Yeah.
not integrate the two men in her life like a common typical fairy tale would see her do at the end. She's torn between these two men, Raoul and the Phantom. And the Phantom is obviously the one that we're supposed to be the most sympathetic to, perhaps even empathetic to, but he's also extremely flawed. And so Rachel Zegler's critiques of Snow White could actually apply here, because the Phantom is creepy and he's weird and he's been like,
and
he's
jealous
jealous
and
yeah, he's everything that Christine maybe doesn't want in a man that she'll spend the rest of her life with. However, he is everything that supposedly, at least within the realm of the film, I should say, like within the text of the movie, she's everything that a woman might want, like for one night, I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
Like you look
Okay.
at like the Google researchers that came out with that book about like pornography and women and what women's tendencies are, and they're like the like the Harlequin romance novels, and like pirates are a big deal, and like millionaires, like 50 Shades of Grey, that kind of thing, like the sort of dangerous side of masculinity, the untethered or uncontrolled, chaotic Dionysian side of masculinity, dark, brooding. These are all words that I think of when I think of the Phantom. But of course, Raoul is Apollonian. Yeah,
Goodness.
he's order. He's the White Knight. He literally rides on a white horse when they fight at the cemetery. He's chivalry. And so you have this great character of Christine, who is like a fully fleshed out woman with feelings and passions and and art that she participates in. And she's torn between these two men. And you could read that as a, this movie is, regressive because it says that a woman has to find her worth in a man. And that's not it at all. It's sort of the tale of Beauty and the Beast. Like the whole entire point of Beauty and the Beast is Beauty has to tame the beast. She has to render the beast into a man. And so that's sort of the Phantom's journey, is he has to accept his deformities as part of himself, not the mask that he wears, not the persona that he puts on. And the question is he able to do that? And obviously I do not think he is able to do that, which makes it a tragic story. I don't think he accepts himself for who he is at the end of the film. His deformities and his control of Christine, because again, the creepy part of the Phantom comes in when you start to realize that he has been like manipulating her life since she was a child. Her father had these dreams of an angel and all, and then the Phantom comes in and like whispers to her through the like the sewage grate or whatever. And he's been manipulating her since she was a little girl. And at the same time,
it's like the dark
side.
Right,
exactly. It's Palpatine whispering, things into Padme's ears or Anakin's ear, and like a serpent,
and the devil in the garden.
Exactly. So I view his deformities as sort of this arbitrary tragedy of the world. Like bad things happen to people, bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to children. And he's a child. We see him as a child, a deformed child. And
like the Elephant Man.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's this element of his deformities being natural. And of course, if we go back to our discussion in Silent Hill and the way that, that women are represented by mythology, femininity is supposedly chaotic, right? It's the chaotic, it's the chthonic release of nature in a way. Again, like women being the natural selectors, that's the direct link between women and nature, I guess you could say. And so in a way, he masks his deformities, he masks that arbitrary tragedy of the world that is on himself, and he also tries to control a woman. He tries to control the very thing that represents in a psychological way, I guess you could say, or a representative way, a metaphorical way, the arbitrary cruelty of the natural world, and it doesn't work out for him ultimately. Like he can't have her. The only place that the Phantom can actually have Christine is on a stage of his own production. It's fake. It's not real.
Right. Which is the same thing as Silent Hill, right? They're only when they're reunited at the end, it's in something that isn't reality.
Yeah, and in Silent Hill, they're not even reunited. Like Christopher walks out onto the porch and like he can't see her; he can only feel her for the rest of his days. Like that's the Phantom, is that unrequited like. So he says I think the lyric is, he was bound to love you when he heard you sing. And so all the training that the Phantom has given Christine has actually led to Raoul falling in love with her and taking her away from him. So he has done this to himself, and he is perpetually going to be lurking behind the statue, watching Raoul and Christine together, caressing the rose that she drops, right? His rose. But it's also that rose that is going to forever stay on her grave, you know? So there's a beautiful element to it because it's unrequited love, and because that's a big theme that makes people, you know, invested and crazy and, you know, emotional. But so it's beautiful, but it's also deeply tragic and
And that is the theme of your comfort films, is tragedy.
Yep. The reality of the world,
which is so interesting in terms of you as a person, because you are so like upbeat and positive, and I feel like you have a genuine hopefulness and optimism to you. I mean, you couldn't be a teacher if you didn't find value in passing these things on. So it is an interesting, I wouldn't even say dichotomy necessarily, because I like the way that you phrased it earlier about that these things aren't necessarily opposites, or like this, it's this thing or that thing. It's just, it's more that they're two sides of something, or they're just the flip side of something, rather than being completely autonomous on their own standing. But I do find that interesting that would produce a sensation in you that makes you feel relief in some way.
Sure. Well, seeing these things represented and purged in a way, like we go back to that we were talking about. I don't even remember what brought up. Why did I bring up Virginia Woolf and The Exorcist and other things? I don't remember, but it's like that sort of
exorcism and catharsis,
this sort of cathartic,
is actually
this cathartic thing. I mean, like there is something deeply cathartic about seeing the Phantom smash the mirrors in his lair. You know, like it's a sad moment, but it speaks to something deeply true and isolated and scared and lonely inside of all of us. You know, the inability to look at in a mirror at yourself. So
it's like, have you seen Sex, Lies, and Videotape?
Sadly not. No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I won't spoil it, but there's a moment there where Graham does something about his situation and he can see it clearly. I was going to say, this is what I love about my favorite films. Like Virginia Woolf is my favorite film, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And it's not just that they have an exorcism, it's that the exorcism then directly leads to them seeing the truth of their situation, and they are able to move forward.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason that it ends with the light coming in the window and him saying, "Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?" And she says, "I am George." I
Revelation.
Am. So
right.
Yeah. And that it's not just that it's tragic and like, you can't do anything to change your fate. It is that, no, like actually we can smash this illusion. I'm aware of it
Mm.
now, and I can do something about it.
Mm.
And that, to me, is the most powerful cinema, easily, or the most powerful thing in art, period. The most powerful thing in a relationship is to get to a point of communication where you're no longer fighting about the same things or arguing about the same things, if you both can see what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what we're all like trying to do at all times.
Yeah, the interesting thing, like we brought up masks earlier, and there's obviously there's a lot of mask play in this movie. And
Literally, yeah.
it's
And Masquerade.
right, yeah, Masquerade. And then of course, like even the costume design in Masquerade, like the costumes are black and white. Sometimes they're literally even split down the middle, like one person is black and white. And so you have that, well, we didn't use the word dichotomy, but you have that maybe integration, right? Of the two sides of the coin and people. The masks are interesting to me because of course everybody wears masks. Even now, like I'm wearing a mask. Like, I'm this is a podcast and I'm like, here I am, like presenting myself to the world and blabbering on for over an hour about the Iliad when nobody wants to hear about that. They want to hear about Revenge of the Sith, and they also want to hear Amy's opinions. You logged Phantom of the Opera and you didn't rate it. I want to know what you think. But like the masks that we wear, there's something to them still. Like Nietzsche in Beyond Good and Evil, he says, whatever is profound loves masks. And so there's an element of the human nature that is drawn toward. And again, there's a reason why the Greeks played their tragedies out with masks, right? So like the Phantom in this movie, he longs to hide behind a mask, but it's I feel like that's a very empathetic reality of something that people can relate to. Everybody can relate to. But also it's
and that's the theme of like David Foster Wallace to a T.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, like
yeah.
I was just reading Good Old Neon right before we recorded, and that he's literally the main character is Neil is talking about being a fraud, and he gets therapy because he's a fraud and he's been a fraud all his life. And the whole thing is about being a fraudulent person who manipulates people and knows how the game is played. And
so go to therapy.
There's a scene where the analyst thinks that he's pointing something out and saying, well, if you were really a fraud, you wouldn't be able to tell me the truth about you being a fraud. And that really saddens him because he's like, he knows now that the analyst cannot help him because that's the most obvious conclusion that anybody could come to. And that what we are really yearning for, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but it struck me today very strongly, is we are yearning for someone who can't be fooled. And we want someone or something that we can't manipulate, that will expose us, and that has enough, Foster Wallace calls it firepower in this story, but like has the ability to actually help us. And as soon as we figure out that we can pull one over on people, we're disinterested. And they are at bay to a certain extent.
Do you think that's who Christine is to the Phantom? That
she cannot unmask him?
Both that she can and can't, because she actually physically does twice. She takes his mask off.
Yeah, but not in a transformative. She doesn't have the tools within herself to be able to do such a thing.
Right. Which again is the tragic element. And also the sort of the meta part of that is the only place that she's able to take his mask off is one in private underneath the city where no one else can see. And then when it happens in front of people, it's on a stage again as part of a production that the Phantom himself has meticulously put together, and it's a fiction. It's not reality. But she breaks that fiction by ripping his mask off, and that's when everything just crumbles apart. And it's like he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for that.
Well, it's the same thing that's explored in that you just reminded me of like Synecdoche, New York, where he Philip Seymour Hoffman's character makes an entire soundstage of his life
Oh,
and
right.
has
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
play characters, and then eventually you get so blurry with
Mhm.
your distinction that you don't know what things happened or what are real memories and all of that. So that gets off in an entirely different
Yeah.
tangent, but I do think that I understand what you're saying about perhaps the value of artifice, and the value of like pretend, it either allowing for or enabling a deeper truth to come out that wouldn't be facilitated
Mhm.
otherwise if you were only dealing with the
Mhm.
real.
And
And so in that sense, it's
yeah,
actually
you see
useful.
that happen in this film, but also you see it fail. I think that's why it's
Mm-hmm.
deeply poignant. I think that's why it speaks to
Right.
me. Yeah, yeah, it's a great film. Would you agree? Question mark.
The only reason that I'm so iffy on it is because I don't know that I like it as a movie at all.
Really?
Um, yeah, like I think that it's so not gratuitous
Okay.
exactly, but just it's so much for me. And then there's all this stuff that I read like years ago about Emmy Rossum. I think she was like 17 and Patrick Wilson was like
Oh, sure.
38 or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And there's all this other stuff in my head that's like very
Hmm.
uh topical for the
Yeah.
actual film that got in the way of my thinking. But I do think that this is sort of a different feeling, I suppose, but the thing that it spoke to for me personally in this particular example of the film is that sometimes when you feel like your emotions are so ordinary, it's nice to see them exaggerated on film. This is how I feel about Moulin
Hmm.
Rouge. Um, it's how I feel about like you're saying, like big production, big canvas movies, because it takes what you feel are sort of um feelings that you'd be ashamed of, or feelings that you think you should minimize, or like
Hmm.
jealousy, self-loathing, things that you're trying to like discard and aren't
Addiction.
acceptable. When you see them, yeah, when you see them in an art form where they're allowed to be their overblown selves, it does feel
Yeah,
better.
cathartic melodrama.
Um,
Um, yeah, yeah. That's a really
yeah,
good
to
way
a
to put
certain
it.
extent, and I think that that's how I felt watching Phantom,
Okay.
and I didn't really know how to rate that.
Okay. Fair enough.
So
Um,
so that's where I was
okay.
at.
Okay. I'll accept it.
Mm. And for that, Tyler, 1 hour and 33
Jeez, oh
minutes later,
peas. Oh no.
to recap your films, Tyler wants you to see Silent Hill, Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and Phantom of the Opera. Tyler, it's been a
Such a
pleasure. I
strange.
hope that you
Yeah,
watch this
yeah.
back and that you appreciate it. We have now recorded the length of a feature film, over 90 minutes. And
We
everybody,
knew it
thank you
was
for
going to
tuning
happen.
in.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
did. I'm glad that we
Okay.
kept it
Well,
under
thank you
2
so much for
hours.
having me on. Real quick, I just want to shout out my wife, who is also named Amy. If it wasn't for her, I would have
Yes.
never seen the movie Phantom of the Opera. This is the one movie. The other two movies are very nostalgic to me. I did not grow up watching Phantom of the Opera, but my wife did. And so, in a way, I kind of like vicariously live her going to chorus and watching Phantom of the Opera every year because the teacher had no better movie to show them, I guess. So yeah. So anyway, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very
Yeah.
sweet, Tyler. Thank you and pleasure. We'll see you at the movies.